All right, helpful hiding requires responsibility. Important to note that helpful hiding involves deliberation, prayer, awareness, and conscious choice. It's a component of wisdom. Be sober in all things, 2 Timothy 4:5. It is not reactive, automatic, or impulsive. Helpful hiding isn't a knee-jerk response. It's also truthful. It never involves lying to God, ourselves, or others. If you don't tell people about your conflicts, it can put a wedge of falseness in between you and your relationships from that moment on. I really love that. Barriers to helpful hiding, also very important. I can relate to all these. I don't know about you, but fear of isolation. So it's common for people who are afraid of being separate to have great difficulty being able to set limits, withdraw, or avoid destructive relationships. This is called a codependent problem. Involves a fear that if I'm separate, I'm isolated or alone, right? One woman told me, this is so key, it's more important for me that everyone around me be happy than that I tell the truth. We can all relate to that, though. I can relate to that. Sometimes I'd rather have people around me happy than maybe be honest. And at work, it's been tough because, part of the double bind there is in order for other people to approve of you, you have to be happy. But if you're not feeling happy, then you have to pretend. So if I'm my truth and I'm not showing that I'm showing that I'm not completely happy, then people aren't happy with me. That's hard. Okay. Fear of injury or attack. Many of us learn early in life that going along with others helps us survive. We may have intense fear of confronting others. We want to avoid the risk of hostility or criticism. Most of the time, people with this barrier have come out of relational settings in which they've been the recipients of hostile outbursts. I can relate, I'm sure you can too. The terror they experience then keeps them paralyzed in fear in the present when they encounter the anger of others. So helpful. Now I realize, that's what happens for me. When people get mad at me, I drop in a child, I assume they're angry with me, I think, oh my God, and I'm in danger. Totally old, not useful thing. Naivety. I can even relate to this one. An inability to sense danger in relationships characterizes people with this orientation. For example, my brother always accused me of this. He was actually the one that was dangerous to be in a relationship with. I didn't know at the time. They find themselves constantly in a trust injury cycle. They become attached quickly, idealize the relationship, put all their eggs in the basket, then suffer severe disappointment when their hopes are shattered. It sums up my relationship with my ex-husband in about 2 lines, It's like, oh, good Lord. And I was in my mid-30s. How did I fall into that? After so much work. And see, there I go judging myself, right? It was just part of my process. It's changed now. Okay. This has to do with a conflict and being wise about our own and others' badness. So this would be an integration issue, right? That's what he'd say. It's an integrity issue, the ability to hold good and bad about people at the same time and make sober decisions, wise decisions from that space. Sometimes we may fear that some badness in the other person means all badness. That is, if things aren't ideal, they can't be good. Jesus was wise about this sort of naivety. But Jesus on his part was not entrusting of himself to them, it says, for he knew all men. And because he did not need anyone to bear witness concerning man, for he himself knew what was in man. John 24-25. We are to trust the trustworthy. And it's interesting that they say this because I understand to a certain extent why people thought Jesus must be a deity in order to pick up on this. They think the Bible's saying he's reading minds. Of course, Jesus knew all men because he was part God. When you become a master metaphysicist, right? What's a stupid way to say it? A vibrational master in the sense of sensing energy. So Jesus would have been like an Abraham. He could sense things. When you get around people, you know who they are when you start to be able to sense vibrational energy. Like these days, I can sense more and more, and I'm beginning to understand what I'm sensing in someone versus what they're internally thinking, being in relationship with people more and more. And so you begin to realize that Jesus, this is saying is actually pointing at his vibrational acuity and sensitivity. So it's saying, Jesus on his part was not entrusting himself to them, for he knew men. And he did not need anyone to bear witness concerning man or these men, right? Because he himself knew what was in them. In the other sense, he didn't need people to tell them what was going on with people because he was like, this person's feeling sad. This person's feeling angry. This person has a lot of conflict going on. When someone has a lot of bad thoughts about you, they actually generate a lot of conflict energy in their vibration. It's not as much directly hate or animosity towards you as it is internal conflict, which is fascinating. So, because we all have so much good in us that when we're thinking bad things is in conflict with it. Like, you start to pick up the conflict. So so giving up naivety doesn't mean becoming cynical or jaded. That's why Jesus said, "Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore, be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves." We can be aware of evil without being participants. There's also repetition compulsion. Some people stay in emotionally damaging relationships because it's what they're used to. They're drawn to same sorts of injurious situations that they grew up with. So that's a cycle thing. Along with this cycle, however, is a childlike wish that they'll be able to repair the lack of love they experienced the first time around. The hurt child within them takes responsibility for the injury rather than understanding the lack of love. Funny he uses the phrasing lack of love when that's the Course in Miracles definition of sin. Isn't that cool? Spirit's always coming through. So repair the lack of love they experienced the first time around. So that'd be the sin they experienced from others the first time around. The hurt child, so the hurt child takes responsibility for the injury rather than understanding the lack of love had to do with the other person, not themselves. These people work hard at fixing others, generally to no avail. So I think we can all relate to these. I have pieces of all of them, but it's really cool to see that there's this way of helpful hiding, but it has to be done responsibly. And it's interesting to focus, just slightly identify those things that can stop us and realize this so we can align with those vibrations in ourselves when they show up. And then otherwise, let's move on to something more interesting or what's more focused on the point of power, which is a beautiful new skill to be in relationship and feel safe and in alignment at all times, and have even a different lens for realizing what out of alignment verbiage for out of alignment can be and in alignment can be, and how these conversations can help us play around with, am I moving towards the positive or negative, and what does my heart feel like the trust injury cycle, where am I focusing my thoughts and love?